NFL Talk with Elite Wages.
Yo, what's happening, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of NFL Talk of Elite Wages. We are into NFL Week 16 now, and obviously it's the start of the Christmas period as well. So we've got the festive schedule coming up, and obviously with this being a busy schedule over the festive period, I've decided to try and space out my episodes and the plays I'm going to be giving. So for this week's episode, this one in particular, I'm going to be leaving my fantasy football, and I'm going to do a fantasy football segment for Christmas Day games. We've got two games on Christmas Day, so I'll be sharing my favourite players for DFS on my Christmas episode, which will be out on Monday as well. So keep an eye out for that one if you want the fantasy plays. But for today, we've got a huge episode, probably one of my favourite ones of the year. We've got a huge NFL slate. Obviously, we've got two games on Saturday this week, and we got the full NFL Sunday slate, and then we got Monday Night Football as well, which is my Packers. So I'm very excited for this week's NFL slate. And as well as that, we've got a huge college football playoffs coming up this weekend, starting this weekend. As you all know, I'm not the biggest college football guy. I'm not as knowledgeable in that sort of area. But if you are a regular, or if you have been listening to my podcast episodes in recent weeks, or any episodes at all, you will have heard me talk about my favourite college football guy, Daly. He is legit the best guy I know for college football. I follow his plays on the regular basis. He texts me all the time, tells me to put on a play, and I put it on, and 9 times out of 10, it's a winning play. So he is legit my favourite and my best college football capper. He's one of my good friends as well. So that is why I'm extremely pleased to announce I've managed to pull him away from his busy schedule, and he's agreed to jump on here for his own segment. I give him his own little segment, and he's going to be going through the college football slate, sharing his views, opinions, his own college football preview for the playoffs. So we'll hear from him a little bit later, but for now, let's have a quick recap on last week, which was NFL Week 15, and then let's get into NFL Week 16. I've got nothing on Thursday Night Football. But obviously, like I said, we kick off the festive week with 2 Saturday games and a full NFL Sunday. So let's go back and have a look at NFL Week 15. We were actually 5-4 for plus 1.47 units. Small profit, but I really hoped for more. I really hoped for some nice plays coming through from last week, but it didn't go that way. We had a double cash in the Cowboys game, so we had Cowboys money line at plus 130. Rico Dowdle over 84.5 rushing yards as well, which cast at minus 110. We had 2 losing plays in the Browns game. It was a bit optimistic in my opinion. I went for the Browns plus 4.5, which lost. I went for Jameis Winston over 39.5 passing yards as well, which lost. He actually got hooked in that game. He got taken out of the game. So 2 losers there. Bengals team total over 25.5, easy money, easy cash. That was at minus 110 as well. Chargers minus 3. They got absolutely battered by the Buccaneers, so that was a loss. Steelers and Eagles over 42. Should have won, but it didn't. Ended with 40 points. The Eagles had an easy opportunity for a chip shot field goal on 4th and 25 or something like that. But instead, it was 4th and 1 on the 25-yard line. Sorry, so. Could have easily just kicked that field goal to get an extra 3 points, which would have cast a bet. Unfortunately, he went for a quarterback sneak to get it and knelt for the rest of the game. So took a loss on that one. And another double cash on the Packers game. So we had Packers minus 3 at plus money, that's plus 100. And Josh Jacobs over 73.5 rushing yards at minus 110 as well. So again, 5-4 for plus 1.47 units. So that plus money play in the Cowboys game pretty much saving us last week. But let's get into NFL Week 16. So I started last week with a few controversial bet selections, and I actually split those 2 and 2. Obviously the Cowboys game and the Browns as well. The 2 winners being really good reads. the two that lost being really bad reads. So let's try and fix that and get another controversial bet selection to win. And it's going to be starting in the Chiefs and Texans game. So the Houston Texans, they will travel to Arrowhead opened up as 3-point favourites against Kansas City Chiefs. The Chiefs have already booked their place into the playoffs. They're extremely close to securing the number one seed in the AFC as well. The Texans have also locked in their spot in the playoffs after clinching their division last weekend. Now both teams are in. They technically don't have much to play for. We could see some more rotational players come in on occasions, but for the Chiefs, they'll want to solidify that number one spot in this conference. I'm a huge fan of not backing the Chiefs this year. Obviously, you've heard me mention this numerous amount of times in the past couple of weeks. Only 3 wins have been larger than a one-score game. All the rest have averaged 5 points in the win differential category. But one thing we are going to have to get used to is the Chiefs are just going to find a way to win. I've mentioned previously how fluky they've been. A walk-off field goal win, a blocked field goal for the win, interception to clinch a win, forced fumble to clinch a win, missed penalties, whatever way possible. It could have happened, it has, and it's favoured the Chiefs every time. There was a stat floating around on Twitter that said only 5 teams haven't scored more than 30 games this year. Those 5 teams were the New York Giants, who are 3-12, the Jets, who are 3-11, the Raiders, who are 2-12, Patriots that are 3-11, and the Kansas City Chiefs, who are 13-1. So, in that category, they're obviously the best record in the league, but one of the worst stats in the league with the worst teams in the league as well. So it may not have been pretty. It's not pretty football that the Chiefs have been playing, and the pretty football that the Chiefs have been used to playing over the past couple of years, and the one that we've all got used to watching. But this may be their new way of playing. A nitty-gritty, hard-fought wins. I don't know. I'm not sure. But whatever they're doing, it's been working for them. So this is a close game to call, in my opinion. At the start of the season, I'm sure I wasn't the only one to have high hopes for this Texans team, but they've just been another team that's just doing things to get by, rather than dominate teams as they did last year. Add to the fact they've been fairly disappointing. Mahomes is now questionable with a high ankle sprain. Even though he was a full participant in practice this week, he is expected to go. But this ankle injury is something he has been able to play through in the past. And obviously, the Chiefs having a 2-game cushion over the Bills, they may consider giving him a full 11 days rest as they play on Christmas Day. So, in my opinion, that means it's down to the Chiefs' defense to get this win. If Mahomes does play, he's a little bit banged up. The Chiefs' defense is going to have to hold out the Texans, and they just have to basically get by on offense. KC is already a top 5 defensive unit, holding teams to just 18 points per game this season, but they have improved that even more in the last 3 weeks, allowing 17, 7 and 17 again, for a league high average of 13.7 points per game allowed. Admittedly, those 3 teams were against the Raiders, Chargers and Browns, who are 3 of the lowest scoring teams in the NFL, but they have been able to keep opponents under 21 points in 10 of 14 games this season. And that's similar to what the team total number is for the Texans this week. So the Texans will be a significant improvement on the Chiefs' last 3 opponents, but the Texans team total over 18.5 is the play I'm going to be looking at for this game. It's going to come down to very fine margins. In their last 5 games, the Texans have cleared 21 points in 4 and 10 in 14 games this year. On the season, they average 23 points per game, but there's no doubt this is going to be the toughest defense they've faced to date. Similar to the Chiefs, the Texans also hold a top 10 defense, which is another reason I like their offense this week. The Chiefs' secondary hasn't been as solid as previous seasons, without Snead, a few other bits missing. And their secondary has been exposed quite often this year, which should allow Stroud, Tank Dell, Nico Collins to work their magic, even Joe Mixon as well in the passing game. With Patrick Mahomes banged up, if he plays, the Texans will aim to get to Mahomes quickly and often to try and disrupt any sort of momentum he builds while he's on a potential bad ankle. Hopefully meaning the Chiefs defense is on the field for a long time, getting less rest in between offense and defensive series. Obviously, tiring defense is no way to play a potentially hot offense like this Texans team. A similar story could be said if the Chiefs field Carson Wentz. If they do sit Patrick Mahomes, Carson Wentz comes in. He hasn't played a full regular season game since last January for the Rams, but that's been his only full game start since 2022. The Texans' offense has found a rhythm recently. They've scored 20, 23, 27, 34 and 23 in the last 5. With a point to prove against a potentially banged up Patrick Mahomes as well. This is an ideal spot for the Texans to take advantage, and I think this is going to be a little regression spot for the Chiefs defense as well. So I'm going to put 1 unit on the Houston Texans team total over 18.5 at odds of 1.9. So the next game I'm going to go for, which is another Saturday game, and potentially another controversial bet. It's also going to be another bet on a Steelers game. That'll be my 9th of the season. So I've bet on the Steelers or in a Steelers game for 9 times this year. It's going to be the Steelers versus Ravens. I don't know what it is about this team, but they just draw me in. Every time I see them on the board, I'm looking at their lines. One of the first teams I look at is the Steelers. I had the over in this matchup a few weeks back. Both teams were kept well under wraps. It ended 18-16. For this game, I'm going to back both offenses to keep firing. They've done that majority of the year. Starting with the hosts, Baltimore, they have a powerhouse on offense, averaging the 3rd most points per game with 29.9. They've been consistent scorers. They've scored 20 or more in all but 2 games, so that's 12 out of 14. One of those games was against the Steelers a few weeks back. The Baltimore defense is middle of the pack as well this year, regressing on last year's progress. They actually allow 23.7 points per game to opponents. They have allowed opposing teams to score 20 or more in 10 of 14 games this year. A similar story is for the Steelers. Surprisingly, they are actually a top 10 offense this year, averaging 24 points per game. That has slightly increased to 28 in their last 3 games. Defensively, they've been very, very solid as they have done for numerous years. They allow the 6th least points per game to opponents, averaging 18, but recently they have let slip a little bit. They allowed 26 on average in the last 3 games. With both teams firing on offense and both teams having the potential to break down and allow opponents to score points, I believe the best play in this game is for both teams to score 15 or more points. Historically, these 2 teams play out low-scoring games. The game total in this game is 45, and that could be another under, but I still believe we see both teams hitting 15 as they've done that regularly this season. However, in the last 10 head-to-heads, both teams have scored 15 or more in only 3 matchups. But with all to play for in this division, I think we can have a back and forth game with some points. So I'm going to put 2 units on this one. So I'm going to go 2 units. Ravens and Steelers both scored 15 or more, and that's going to be odds of 1.6. So 2 units will return 1 unit profit. And we're going to go to another divisional matchup in the same division. And I'm actually going to go back to back on the same market, on the same team. So I've played this multiple times this year, and while it's around this sort of number, I'll continue to play it for the rest of the year. This is going to be the Bengals and Browns game, but more specifically the Cincinnati Bengals team total over 27.5. I've played this numerous times this year. As I've mentioned for 2 weeks prior to this, the Bengals are a hot offense. They're top 5 in points per game on average, averaging 28.5, and they've scored 27 or more in 6 straight games, in 9 of 14 in total as well this year. Joe Burrow and the Cincinnati offense averaged the 5th most touchdowns per game with 3.5. They're converting a field goal at 76% as well, which is obviously meaning this team is really, really deadly against most teams. They'll now face a team who, for the most part, has been one of the best defensive units in recent years, but they haven't sort of lived up to that sort of stature this season. Cleveland, they're allowing 7th most points to opponents, averaging 25.4 points per game, and they've also allowed the 5th most touchdowns, which is 3.1 on average per game. The Browns have allowed their opponents 27 or more in 4 of the last 5 games as well, but they did manage to hold the Bengals to 21 points a few weeks back. Jameis Winston was benched for the Browns last week, so their starting quarterback position is up for grabs. With no David Njoku, no Nick Chubb, their offense will struggle, and a tired defense is not a good thing when they face a Bengals offense as hot as it is. The Bengals have more to play for in this game. They still do have a very, very slim chance at the playoffs, but it's going to have to start with a win against a divisional rival. In recent years they have been dominated by the Browns as well, but I believe the Bengals will put on a statement win, and I think they will score 28 or more points in this game. So we're going to go 1 unit Bengals, team total over 27.5 at odds of 1.9. The next play I'm going to run into is in the Rams and the Jets game. So the Jets, they have been eliminated from playoff contention, and well, it's in true Jets fashion that they found their offensive rhythm when it mattered least. They're already out, and their offense has looked really good recently. This momentum that they've got now would have been an ideal place to start a few weeks back when they actually needed it most. But for now, the fans get to enjoy Aaron Rodgers and the Devontae Adams connection again, which looks to be stronger than ever. Adams has over 300 yards and 3 touchdowns in the last 3 weeks, and Rodgers has thrown for over 600 yards and 4 touchdowns in the last 2 weeks. In the first 10 games of the season, the Jets really struggled to score points. They only scored over 20 just 4 times in the first 10 games, with their points per game average in those 10 being just 17. Coincidentally, 3 of those 4 games where they scored over 20 points were their 3 wins. Since then, they've scored over 20 in all 4 games. They've scored 27, 21, 26 and 32, which is a 26.5 average. But even though they've found a groove on offense, they haven't sort of translated that into wins yet, winning just 1 of those 4 games. As well as a newfound offense, their defense has let them down this year. They averaged 23 points per game allowed, and they've only kept 4 teams under 20 points this year. Their most recent games have been their best offensively, but they have possibly been their worst stretch defensively. They allowed all 5 teams in the last 5 games to score 25 or more, averaging 28 points to opponents. As for the Rams, they still have it all to play for. They started 1-4. But they've actually bounced back in a huge way, going 7-2 since. In that 9-game stretch, they've been able to, they've been back to full health, back to full strength, with all their offensive weapons, and they've scored 20 or more in 7 of 9 games, averaging 24 points per game in those games. They played out a real tough game against the 49ers last week in what turned out to be a defensive battle, which the Rams won. That game ended 12-6, and they obviously showed their defensive unit can be just as good as their offense. The game prior, they beat the Bills in a shootout game, which they won 44-42, which shows both sides of their team can play very well at any given moment. The Rams have actually played 10 defenses ranked inside the top half of the league so far, and 9 offenses in the top half of the league so far. So they've played out some real battles, and they've scored plenty of points in those games. But they've also allowed a fair share of points as well, as they allow an average of 24 points per game to opponents this year. This game screams over to me. The Jets have found a nice rhythm on offense with Rodgers, Tay, Wilson. Stafford has been playing really well with Puka, Cooper Kupp, Kyren Williams for the last 9 games as well. I expect this to be another shootout game, as we saw a few weeks back when the Rams faced the Bills. I think both teams can contribute to the over in this game, but I think the Rams are in fine form. I do believe they will be able to beat the Jets this week, and they still have everything to play for in their division. They still have a playoff spot. They still have the potential number 1 spot in this division as well. So I'm going to put together a little alternative line parlay, and it's going to be the Rams money line and over 36.5 points. That's going to give you odds of 1.86 as well. So that's going to be another 1 unit play on that one. So the next one, again, you know me, another divisional matchup. Eagles versus Commanders. So at the beginning of the season, this Commanders team shocked a lot of people in their 4-1 start with Jaden Daniels. It took people noticed this team, and have since been impressed with this whole outfit. The Commanders offense has scored 20 or more in 12 or 14 games, and that ranks them as the 6th highest in points per game on average. One of those teams that held them under 20 were the Eagles. The Eagles may be the best team in football, if not the best right now. If they're not number 1, they are definitely top 3. There's only sort of the Lions, maybe the Ravens in the top 3 category as well. They're 12-2, 10 straight wins. They've covered the spread in 7 of the last 9 games. The Eagles aren't just beating up bad teams either. They've won against the Steelers, Ravens, Rams, and the Commanders in the last 5 weeks. So, 5 solid teams. The Eagles have covered the spread against all 4 of those playoff teams as well. They are beasts on offense. They've scored 20 or more in 10 straight games, and in 12 or 14 games this year, they average 26.4 points per game, which is slightly lower than the Commanders. But make no mistake, this Eagles team is locked down on defense. The Eagles have the lowest points per game average allowed in the league with 17.6. They've kept all but one team under 20 points in the last 10 games too. So the truth is, this Eagles team has it all. The Eagles are also one of the best road teams in football this year. They rock a 6-1-0 record against the spread as the away team. A top offense and a top defense, which is going to be hard for any team to beat. With the Eagles gunning for that number 1 seed in the NFC, I expect another straightforward win this week. So I'm going to go 1 unit on the Eagles -3 at odds of 1.83.
Sunday Night Football.
So we're back on Sunday Night Football. This game is going to be a really, really good game. So 2 teams headed in different directions this season. The Buccaneers versus the Cowboys. Now the Cowboys, they haven't been able to contend this year, while the Bucs are leading their division. I'm going to keep this one quite short because I don't think much explanation is needed. The Cowboys have been woeful all year round on both sides of the ball. On offense, they averaged 21 points per game, but on defense, they allowed the 3rd most points to opponents, averaging 27. The Cowboys have picked up a few nice results, going 3-2 in the last 5 games, but 2 of those came against the Panthers and the Giants. They failed to hold all but one team under 20 points in the last 9, with that one team being the Panthers, and have allowed 7 teams to score 25 plus in those same 9 games. The Bucs will be the visitors this week, but everyone knows historically the Cowboys haven't been a dominant home team. They're actually 1-6 at home this year, and the Bucs are rolling right now after suffering 4 straight losses. They had a bye week and then bounced back to win 4 straight. So the bye week came just at the right time for them, winning 4 straight after the bye week. The Bucs continue to look great all over the field, especially on offense. One important area the Bucs needed to improve was their O-line, and Mayfield has been protected fairly well. He was only sacked once last week, and PFF has Tampa Bay as the 4th best offensive line in the league. This is actually ideal as they'll face Micah Parsons. He's one of the best pass rushers in the league, and if they can contain him, the Bucs should get their way all game long. The Bucs have been scoring at will this year as well, averaging the 4th best 28.8 points per game on average, with their team total number at 27.5. This is the play I'm going to target this week. Over the course of the season, they have hit 28 or more in 8 of 14 games, so over 50%, including 3 of the last 4 games. I believe this is an ideal matchup for the Bucs, facing a defense that's slightly deflated. Dallas has the worst red zone defense in the NFL as well. They averaged 73% touchdowns allowed, while the Bucs are 6th best at punching in the red zone at 65%, which is obviously going to help the Bucs team total. Add to that, the Bucs score an average of 3.4 touchdowns per game, with the Cowboys allowing at least 3 in each game. I believe the Bucs will put up points in this game. I think they'll send a message to the rest of the NFC with a statement win. We're getting this number at plus money as well this week, which is an added bonus right in time for Christmas. So we're going to go 1 unit on the Bucs, team total over 27.5 at odds of plus 110. So I'm going to finish up my half of this episode with a parlay, which I'm going to be placing. I've gone through 2 of these 3 teams, so there's no breakdown necessary for this one really. So the parlay is going to consist of 3 teams, which is all going to be money line. Those 3 teams are going to be the Eagles money line, the Lions money line, and the Bucs money line, and that's going to be at plus 225. I'm going to throw 1 unit on that as well. So I've got 7 plays this week. But that's my plays for NFL Week 16 all wrapped up. I'll have another episode on Monday. That'll include my Monday Night Football game between my Packers and the Saints, as well as the 2 Christmas Day games. So, as I mentioned earlier, Daly has been kind enough to jump on to my podcast this week to share his knowledge on the college football playoffs. He's got a ton of information and insights ready for us all. So now's the time for me to hand over to the GOAT himself as he takes us through his college football playoff preview.
What's up, everybody? I go by Daily College Bets, which I think is pretty self-explanatory. I love to bet on sports, especially college football and basketball. Those are the two that I know best, and we've got a really exciting event coming up here starting this weekend in the college football playoff. For the first time ever, it will be 12 teams in this bracket in the college football postseason. So excited to give you guys some information about that. And first of all, it's a pleasure to be here. I want to thank my buddy Elite Wagers for this platform today. Thanks for bringing me on to this podcast. It's been really awesome to see how you've been able to grow this podcast throughout the NFL season while having a really successful season betting on the sport itself, obviously. So props to you, and thanks again for bringing me onto this platform today. I know that a lot of this audience is probably not from the U.S. I don't have Elite Wagers data right in front of me, but obviously the NFL is growing in a popularity all across the world right now, especially in Europe. We've seen the NFL have some games even on site in other countries, such as London and even in Germany this year. But the college game, while here in America, it's really just as big as the NFL. It hasn't really grown quite as much outside the U.S. to this point. Even your host right here, Elite Wagers himself, says he struggles to find information about college football sometimes, and it's not his fault. It's just the sport hasn't really grown to that point yet where it's really available to you guys outside of the U.S., but I'm going to try and provide a little bit of context, some history to all of this going down in college football and how we got to this point where we have a 12-team playoff for the first time ever. So let's jump into it. It can be complicated a little bit, college football, and there are some notable differences between CFB and the NFL. For one, obviously the most basic difference is college rosters are made up of entirely 18 to 22-year-old kids, so younger guys, not fully developed physically. The NFL, every single player on those rosters is a professional. They're a grown man. They're being paid to really do a job, right? While college players still have to go to class, they have other things going on in their lives rather than being 100% devoted to the sport. Obviously, they are locked in, just like the NFL players, but they don't have quite the same access to the time that an NFL player has to hone his craft. So there's a lot more variety in college. There's hundreds of thousands of colleges across the country, all with varying levels of resources and commitments to athletics. So some schools have built-in advantages. Some of them are, for example, in geographical areas that players would want to play in, warmer areas, for example, in the South. High quality program history is another thing that you might look at for players that want to go to certain schools, or maybe your school just has a lot of money or some rich alumni that can help you build up your school's resources. But at the bottom line is it comes down to talent acquisition, and certain schools are in better positions to do that than others. So there's not really quite the same level playing field that you have with the NFL, where they get to sort of pick from an already established field of players from college coming up to the league. With the draft, college teams have to recruit kids out of high school and sort of project where those 15 to 18-year-old kids are going to be in 7 to 10 years. So it's a lot riskier, and there's a lot more parity within the sport. You see a lot bigger spreads, for example, on some of these games. We'll get into the specific games for the first round of the playoff coming up this weekend, and you'll see just some examples even there with some playoff games. But a lot of wild stuff happens in college football, and that's why we love it so much. But not only are certain schools in better positions to achieve good things than others, but so are certain conferences, and that's something that's important to remember here. Is not all conferences are created equal. The Southeastern Conference, for example, or SEC for short, is the toughest conference in college football by far. They have accounted for 15 of the past 20 national titles in football. So they have several teams in the running to do that once again this year. Just remember, right, certain conferences not equal to others. Not like the NFL, where the AFC and the NFC relatively balanced over the years. College football always been more about the regular season traditionally, about enjoying the Saturdays in the fall, about regional rivalries, about traditions. At one point, there was no playoff at all, or even a national title game, but eventually it got too controversial because the media was the one naming the national champion each year, and when you have multiple undefeated teams at the end of the season, it can be, like as I said, very controversial. So they decided they needed a title game, tried that out for a little while, just the two teams facing off at the end of the season, eventually moved to 4 teams over the past decade or so, and now for the first time ever this year, we're moving to a 12-team bracket. Now, if you're thinking about the math of a 12-team bracket, you probably have to realize that the top 4 teams have to get a bye for everything to work out, because then you have 8 teams facing off in the first round, and then 8 teams in the second round, which mathematically works out to 4-2, and then your eventual champion with just the one team. Those top 4 teams in this 12-team bracket get a bye, as I said, and those 4 teams are the 4 highest ranked conference champions. So this year, that's Oregon from the Big Ten, Georgia from the aforementioned SEC, Boise State from the Mountain West, and Arizona State from the Big 12. Boise State and Arizona State both look like they're headed to be pretty significant underdogs in round 2, even though they'll be the higher seed, but that'll be a rant for another day, because there are a lot of questions about this format as we go into year 1 of it. Is going to probably going to take some maneuvering a little bit, because they're still experimenting. 12 teams, as I said, first time this year, so may not go as smoothly as they're expecting, but we will see. But the other thing to note is that these first round games are actually home games. Most of the college football postseason matchups typically are played on a neutral site, but these first round playoff games are going to be played at home for the higher seeded team. So very important to remember that, especially when you think about the geography of the United States. Especially around this time of year, there is a huge difference in the weather in the southern part of the country and the northern half, where we get a lot of snow and cold, windy weather up here. The South, some of these southern teams have never played in those type of environments, and that brings me to talking about some of these games. Let's just jump into it. We've got 4 matchups in the first round, as I said. First one will be played on Friday night, then the other 3 will be on Saturday. Friday is a really interesting matchup. It's between Notre Dame and Indiana. This is actually an in-state matchup. Notre Dame also located in the state of Indiana. This is going to be another cold and windy game. It's going to be in the low 20-degree Fahrenheit range. Notre Dame is a traditional powerhouse in college football. They have a lot of history. They, I believe, have the 2nd or 3rd most wins of any program of all time. Indiana, very much the opposite. They've had a lot of years of being really bad. So, among other reasons, that has been why it's been difficult for some people to kind of buy into this team, despite being 11-1. And a lot of those 11 wins have been really dominant fashion. However, the schedule has been pretty soft, and that's the thing that people keep going back to, and I have to agree. I have a hard time believing in this Indiana team, despite their record. My favorite team, the Michigan Wolverines, they kind of laid out a blueprint on how to stop Indiana late in the season. That Michigan defense held Indiana scoreless in the second half. The next week, they went and played their toughest game of the season, their biggest game, the one that they really had to show out for. That was at Ohio State, and they were only able to put up about 170 total yards, and really were never competitive in that game beyond the first quarter. As I said, the schedule pretty weak, so Indiana really stacked up a lot of those wins against some really bad teams this season. Not their fault, that's just how it goes sometimes in college football. You can't control how good your opponents are going to be. You get your schedule and you do what you can with it. But fun story this season for Indiana, Curtis Rourke has been a really good quarterback, accurate quarterback, but there's a really sizable talent gap between these two teams on the field. As far as just pure talent goes, Notre Dame always ranks pretty highly in the recruiting rankings, and they themselves have quietly been just as dominant as Indiana this season. So early on in the year, going all the way back to week 2, they suffered an upset loss to Northern Illinois. It was a really ugly loss. That's not a team you should ever lose to. Notre Dame was over a 4-touchdown favorite in that game, if you can believe that, and they lost outright at home. But ever since then, 10 straight wins, and 9 of those have been by 14 plus. It's a deep team. It's a balanced team. They've overcome some major injuries and really not skipped a beat at all, even while playing some tougher teams down the stretch. Their schedule got tougher, but their results did not get any, their results stayed the same. They just continued to dominate teams. So I think they're going to continue to roll here in this home game for them. Indiana, again, great story, but this is their first time on this stage. Notre Dame is used to playing in big games. They have a lot of experience in big-time moments like this. Not always great experience. They've lost a lot of these games in the past, but this is the prime opportunity to kind of right the ship in those type of matchups. Notre Dame is definitely a run-based offense, and Indiana does have a top 10 run defense. But again, that strength of schedule makes me really question that stat, because when you look at the one game where they played a really difficult team in Ohio State, OSU was pretty much able to run as effectively as they'd like to in that game. So I think Notre Dame will find a groove on the ground. They will be able to get pressure on the quarterback defensively and force some mistakes. And I think Indiana will really struggle to score here. Cold, windy atmosphere on the road with pressure. So I like Indiana team total under 21.5. I like Notre Dame -7. And I'll also be sprinkling a round prop on this one, which is Indiana to be the lowest scoring team in round 1. So 3 plays there coming at you from the first game on Friday night. We've got 3 games lined up for Saturday, so let's jump into those one at a time. We'll just go by how they start in order. So the first one is going to be SMU, which stands for Southern Methodist University, traveling up north to Penn State, another northern hosted game here, and it's going to be maybe the worst weather of them all. Going to be snowy up there in State College, Pennsylvania. SMU comes from Dallas, Texas. The coldest environment they've played in this season has been about 72 degrees, and this game is going to be in the 20s. So for those of you that use Celsius, you're just going to have to do the math on that, on 72 degrees Fahrenheit versus 20. But either way, SMU not going to be used to playing in this type of cold environment, and I'm not really sure they're going to adjust to it very well. We see a big spread on this game with Penn State favored by 8.5 points now. It just continues to rise. I've even seen some 9s on certain sports books. I do think they're going to cover this game, though. This is a spot where Penn State, again, just like the first game, has a big advantage in overall talent on their roster. The other thing about this Penn State program that you need to know if you haven't heard of them before or aren't familiar with their results, they typically take care of business against all of the teams that they're supposed to beat, and they always lose to Michigan and Ohio State, which are usually the two best teams in their conference in the Big Ten, which kind of means that people don't really take them too seriously. Penn State I think it has a real opportunity here to make some noise for once. They've never been in the playoff because it's been 4 teams, and they always end up in that kind of 6 to 10 range like they are once again this year. But now they have a real opportunity here to beat some teams that they're going to be favored against, but to, again, win some playoff games and sort of gather some momentum for this program in the postseason. Coach James Franklin just has not been able to do that. He's taken a lot of heat for losing a lot of big games and games with their underdogs, and it's understandable. You got to win one of those here and there, but again, against teams that they're favored against and teams that they're quote-unquote supposed to beat, he has an incredible record. Penn State also following a loss, which they lost to Oregon by 8 points in the Big Ten championship game. It was a very competitive game, 45-37. But following a loss under James Franklin, Penn State 24-1 against the spread in that following week. So I think they're going to come out and handle SMU here. I don't have a whole lot of analysis on the stats. I've looked over the numbers. There's really not a ton of edges really either way in this game, except for SMU's pass defense is really rough, ranking 90th in pass yards per game allowed defensively. So I think Penn State in that Oregon game, although they did come up with the loss, that's the number 1 overall seed in the tournament, so no shame in losing that game, and they really found a great balance offensively in that game. Quarterback Drew Aller looked comfortable. He was finding his targets, a variety of them throughout the game, and they ran for over 290 yards in the game as well. Just couldn't get a stop when they needed it defensively. But SMU doesn't quite present the same type of challenges that Oregon does. They are a good offensive team. I will give them that. But again, going to travel on the road here to one of the biggest crowds in the country, over 100,000 fans in Beaver Stadium for Penn State. It's going to be cold. It's going to be snowy. And I think Penn State absolutely rolls here. So give me Penn State minus 8.5. I'm also going to be taking them to make the semifinals. I think they can win the next game once they match up against Boise State. If they do win this one, they will be a double-digit favorite if they face Boise State in that game. So I'll be rocking with that play as well. It's a little bit juicy, so I don't love giving out plays like that generally unless I feel really confident about it, but I feel really good about Penn State winning not only this game but the next one as well. So I'll take them to make the semifinals. I got that at minus 175. So again, some juice, but not worth drinking if you get the result that you want in the end, and that's what we're hoping for here, obviously. So Penn State minus 175 to make the college football semifinals. Clemson and Texas, second game of the day on Saturday and third game of the first round. These are two big-time programs for different reasons. Texas, everybody in the world knows Texas. It's one of the biggest states, not the biggest state by total area, but as the saying goes, everything is bigger in Texas, and that is certainly true for this university and this program. Big brand, lots of money, tons of resources, always going to be a powerhouse down there in Texas with the University of Texas Longhorns. So I don't know why I'm stumbling over UT so much, but Texas, always going to be a big-time program. They have looked dominant for much of this season. They have themselves an Indiana problem, though. They have not played the most difficult schedule. They played Georgia twice, lost both times, once at home and once on a neutral field. Clemson, their opponent in this game, also played Georgia, ironically, back all the way in week 1 on a neutral site. They kept the game close for a half, and their defense competed well, but their offense just couldn't get anything going, and they got kind of crushed in the second half of that game by Georgia. So both these teams have a common loss to that same team. And Texas getting the 5 seed here in this tournament, in general, I would argue that having the 5 seed is the most advantageous spot that you can get in this format, because if you think about it, 5 gets to play 12 in the first round, meaning you have the lowest ranked team in the playoff at home in your first game. Then your next game, you get to play the lowest ranked conference champion that gets the auto bye for the 4 seed. So theoretically, having the 5 seed is actually the best position that you can have, even better than the 1 seed, which again is one of the reasons why this format maybe isn't the best, but I'll save that full rant for another day. But Clemson here, not the typical 12 seed. You're going to see a smaller conference team kind of sneak into the playoff in this spot. But Clemson is, as I said at the top, a big-time program in their own right. Dabo Swinney, their coach, has really turned them into a powerhouse program. Historically, that's not been the case. They were a very average program for a long time, but under Swinney, they have been competing for championships nearly every season. While they only went 10-3 this year, if you look at the pure talent composite scores for rosters across college football, they're still consistently in the top 5 to 7 in pure talent on that roster. So they're a dangerous team, despite some of the results that they've endured this season. Really are playing with house money at the same time in this game. Were not expected to be here. They got fortunate to even play in the ACC Conference Championship game last year. Miami was supposed to be in that game, and they choked away their spot by losing their final game to Syracuse at home. So Clemson, playing with house money right now, has nothing to lose. And I really like the spot here for them. They're getting the most points of any game of the 4 here in the first round. And I'm seeing 12.5 actually on the spread in a lot of cases here for Clemson. But I think that's way too many points. I think they're going to be right here in this game against Texas. Texas, 20 points or fewer, 3 of their last 4 games. That's not going to get it done in this game against a Clemson offense that has really started to gain more balance and more rhythm as the season goes on. They've been able to run the ball better along with throwing it. Their struggles defensively, Clemson has been allowing a lot of big plays. 123rd in the country out of 134 teams is not good in terms of allowing 20-plus yard plays on the season. So that is a concern here against Texas. But again, the Texas offense has been kind of dormant for the past few weeks. Teams have realized that Texas quarterback Quinn Ewers really struggles when you put him under pressure. There's been a lot of chatter for backup quarterback Arch Manning to see more time moving forward. I definitely could see that here in this Clemson game. I would not be shocked to see him out on the field running around, maybe a little bit more using his legs. That's not something that Ewers does particularly well. But I'm expecting a good performance out of Clemson's defense. It hasn't been great statistically throughout the season, but there's been a couple of games where they've really stepped up when they've needed to. And if they can just keep this close, that's all you need in these type of games. These playoff games, if you haven't watched one before, it's not like a typical football game. There's something about it. I don't know if it's just because there's a lot of commercials or what's going on, but these games are long. There's a lot of possessions, and even if you get down by 2-3 touchdowns, it's not over. So keep an eye out for this one. I think Clemson can keep it close throughout. There is certainly a pathway where Texas takes over this game on the line of scrimmage. That's really the key battle on the field that I'll be watching for, is whether Clemson's offensive line can hold up against Texas's front 7, because they have been elite at times during the season, but again, against a weaker schedule for the most part. So Clemson has an opportunity here to show that maybe those stats aren't real, But again, they're going to have to obviously come out and play really well on the road here. Texas getting the home game. But I'm personally not as intimidated by their home stadium. Somebody can clip this and use it as fuel maybe. But Texas, not as intimidating to me as of an environment as a Penn State or a Notre Dame or even an Ohio State, which we're going to talk about next. That's the last game here of the first round. Ohio State and Tennessee, the 8 and 9 seeds. Again, this format, whoever wins this game gets to face the number 1 overall seed in Oregon. That would be the second time, actually, for Ohio State facing the Ducks after losing by 1 point on the road during the regular season. The question that's most important, though, for me, that for predicting this particular game, is whether Ohio State is emotionally prepared for it or not. They're coming off of a loss that is really hard to understand if you aren't familiar with this rivalry. Ohio State and Michigan, maybe the biggest rivalry in all of American sports, certainly the biggest one, in my opinion, in college football. Ohio State had really dominated the rivalry for quite a long time, but Michigan has now won 4 straight. Michigan last season, 2023, won the national championship, so no surprise that they had beaten Ohio State that season. But this year was supposed to be very different. Ohio State invested heavily in their roster. They brought in a lot of key contributors on both sides of the ball, some absolute stars, great players on both sides of the ball. And Michigan lost a lot of talent from that national championship team to the NFL, sent a record number of players to the NFL Combine, and kind of had to pick up the pieces this season. Also lost their whole coaching staff to the NFL from last year. So very different Michigan team. They come into the game at 6-5 on the road at Ohio State, nearly a 3-touchdown favorite. Ohio State was, and they lose outright again to their bitter rivals, Michigan. You can probably tell that I enjoy talking about this a little bit, but seriously, it's going to be important for this game to see how Ohio State responds and how they're able to move on from that one emotionally, because clearly this has become a bit of a mental hurdle for their coach, Ryan Day, and a lot of their fans are fed up. Obviously, they're still in the playoff here and still have a chance to win it all and win a national championship. But some of the fans there either don't think that there's a realistic chance that they can actually do that, or they don't care. They just want their coach out. They're just so sick of losing to Michigan. That's how much that game means to the fans down there. So again, I know I'm spending a lot of time on this for this game, but I think it's the most important factor, whether Ohio State fans are going to show up in the numbers necessary to fill out that stadium and provide the support that the home field advantage that they need to win against a really talented Tennessee team. There's been some rumors that Tennessee has been able to scoop up tickets for this game in large numbers as their fans prepare to travel north up to Columbus. That could be very important for Tennessee because they've had very different results on the road versus at home under their coach Josh Heupel. They've really struggled away from home. So if they can pack out the stadium a little bit with some of their fans, that could maybe make a difference. But Ohio State, I would say slightly more talented roster overall because again, heavily invested in, and they have a lot of talent on both sides of the football. Just some question marks at key positions, including quarterback. And as most of you probably know, if you're football fans, most important position in football is the quarterback. Tennessee also, though, a highly recruited quarterback, highly hyped player, but has kind of struggled off and on throughout this season. He's still figuring it out. Very young player, very talented, as I said, has all the tools, but this is a big spot for him on the road to be able to show what he can do. So I actually feel much better about a total in this game than I do a side. I don't know what to expect from Ohio State. I think if they come out refocused, they should absolutely win this game and cover the 7.5. If they are not able to move past that mental block of losing to Michigan, it's going to be difficult, and they could absolutely lose this game outright, because while Ohio State has an elite defense, Tennessee really does too. Both of these teams top 10 in most statistical categories: points per game allowed, rush yards per game allowed, turnovers forced, you name it. So really good defenses here on both sides. Love the total at the under 46.5. It's the lowest total on the board for the first round, and that is for a reason. So that's the game. That's the play that I'll be taking in this one, is Tennessee, Ohio State under 46.5. So to sum it up real quick, those are my picks for first round college football playoff. Hopefully you guys were able to learn something a little bit here about the process and about how college football really works here in the U.S. But Notre Dame -7, Indiana team total under 21.5 are both plays for the first game. Round prop, I'll be taking Indiana, the lowest scoring team in the round. Penn State -8.5. Penn State also to be the highest scoring team of the round, reverse of the Indiana play. Penn State to make the semifinals, -175. Clemson +12.5. I might even sprinkle on the first half money line there as well. I don't have that one locked in yet though. And then Tennessee, Ohio State under 46.5. That may be my favorite pick on the entire card. So those are the picks for the first round. Thank you again to Elite Wagers very much for having me on today. If you want to hear more from me, you can check out weekly spaces I do on my Twitter page at Daily CFB CBB, 10 a.m. Eastern time. That you're gonna have to probably use Google to convert that to whatever time zone you're in. But each Saturday we do that throughout college football season. We break down the full slate of games, and we'll be starting to do that soon with college basketball each week as well. So hope to see some of you over there. And once again, thanks to Elite Wagers. Best of luck to all of you and your picks, and enjoy the first round of the college football playoff.
Wow, what a breakdown. And college football playoff preview. So as you said, I'm not the biggest college football player in the betting community. I do struggle to get, all the stats and data and things like that you do over in the US. But obviously when I've got a guy like Daly, I don't need to do that myself. I can just tailor his plays. So obviously you certainly know your stuff. So appreciate you for taking the time to jump on and share your thoughts and all your betting selections for the college football playoff weekend this weekend. Everyone head over to his Twitter, Daily CFB CBB. Subscribe to his Dub Club too. You can join the Discord, which is called BetClass, that we run together. The link for those three I will post in the bio under his name, so you can click on the link tree. You can follow him on all socials and things like that. Show him some love. So yeah, I hope everyone appreciated Daily jumping on. I hope everyone enjoyed this episode this week. It's probably been the most fun I've had all season long. A nice big long episode with lots of stats and insight and things like that to help us make some money before Christmas weekend next weekend. So as always, appreciate everyone for taking the time to listen. Good luck to anyone and everyone who tails myself and Daily this weekend. If you could be so kind as to click the linktree link in my bio below, you'll find all forms of social media for myself, all streaming platforms: Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, Twitter, TikTok, YouTube, anywhere and everywhere. If you could head over, drop me a like, a follow. I will follow back. Subscribe, turn notifications on, and share. It's all free. Obviously that way it can help me reach a wider audience, so I can help more and more people win some more money. So I hope everyone has a great Christmas period with their friends and family. I hope everyone stays safe. Merry Christmas, and I'll catch you later.